Welcome back. As India stresses on the promise of a strong retaliation anytime it faces an act of terror, just like it did with Operation Sindoor, striking at Pakistan's terror hubs and also at its air bases, it's now clear that this is an inflection point of India rightly lowering its tolerance to terror, speaking from a position of strength, both militarily and also diplomatically. To understand the key takeaways from the Prime Minister's speech yesterday and also the future of India-Pakistan ties, we have with us former ambassador, former diplomat, Javed Ashraf. Thank you, Ambassador Ashraf, for joining us on this broadcast. The Prime Minister yesterday said that while it is true that present times are not an age of war, this is also not the age of terrorism. How do you see this in the context of the ceasefire that both countries, India and Pakistan, have agreed to, and the Prime Minister making it clear that it's all subject to how Pakistan behaves?
Well, I think, first of all, if you remember, Prime Minister has always been speaking about zero tolerance for terrorism. Now, it had to be, in a sense, defined as to how we would achieve it. In the past, we have also tried diplomatic measures, financial measures, mobilize the international community to exert pressure on Pakistan. We've tried every particular instrument that was available to us. We've also seen an escalation in our military response in Uri and then in Balakot before that. I'm saying this is because contextualizing it, because what we are seeing today are some very important takeaways from Prime Minister's speech last night. One, of course, he rightly chose to wait to get the full briefing from the military leaders about what exactly happened, what was the nature of the damage. It was important to do that because it's an act of responsibility not to rush into making speeches as soon as something happens. And what he has said is, one, that there are three very important elements in this. One is that there will be a military response to an act of terror. And so that's a very clear thing. If you hit us, we'll hit you back harder. The second is, and I think that's a very important point, and we can discuss this further, is that we were not going to be back off because of nuclear blackmail or the use of nuclear threats, which we have seen in the past, and we saw also in the run-up to Operation Sindoor. And the third is also very important, which perhaps didn't get as much attention, is that we are saying that we do not no longer wish to distinguish between terrorists and those who sponsor terrorism, which is that the Pakistan state, its military. And that's a very important point because you've, as Prime Minister pointed out, you saw senior military leaders attending the funeral of slain, well-known, internationally proscribed terrorists. So this was an important point. Another very important message that Prime Minister conveyed, and this was important to repudiate any kind of hopes people had outside about mediating that terror and talks, terror and trade, and water and blood issue. And you've all seen that's the way he ended. So clearly now the issue is also very important to remember that there will be an element of both strategic ambiguity as well as a surprise element. We did something this time which we hadn't done before. So they were perhaps expecting something else, and the response was entirely out to you. So the strategic ambiguity is really about, okay, what will be the threshold when we will launch a kinetic attack? What will be the threshold or the scale of violence and nature at which we will take this option? And then finally, remember that this is an ongoing operation. We've had a pause, suspension, but it's really that we're not saying that this process has ended. We will remain alert. We will remain, in a sense, some stage of mobilization. And the new age warfare that Prime Minister spoke about enables us also to have rapid mobilization and be able to respond very decisively in a very short period of time. So in a sense, for the first time, we're clearly defining a counter-terrorism strategy that is, in line with the objective of zero tolerance for terrorism.
Very nicely enlisted all the big takeaways, and I'm going to come to all of that in just a bit. But help me understand this basic thing that all of us have been thinking about. How does India balance its own aspirations of Viksit Bharat and also countering terror with combative operations? Because there's a cost to both. There's an India growth story that shouldn't stop because India needs growth, India needs jobs, opportunities, but India also has to go after Pakistan-sponsored terror because safety is so important. Is there a calibrated balance possible here?
No, I think that, deterrence has been clearly marked. Resolve has been clearly laid out. The red lines have been clearly drawn. You need a secure Bharat for a Viksit Bharat. I mean, the two are very clearly, very, very closely interlinked. If a country does not feel a sense of security or a sense of stability, then perhaps it is going to be very hard to pursue the vision that we have of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And, as you've seen, every 3 to 4 years, we see a major attack, which leads to an extraordinary mobilization of forces, consumption of our diplomatic energy, an element of economic cost, great stress on our social fabric, government distracted from pursuing this. So if you have the cycle every 3 to 4 years, and if these attacks take place precisely at a time when we are riding high on our growth, then it does have a negative impact. So therefore, we have seen over the past 25 years or 26 years that we face this cycle of attacks, and it leads to a familiar patterns of responses, which actually is worse for our long-term growth. And therefore,
Right.
we need to be able to work on a deterrent strategy which assures our people, assures our investors that we are responsible and restrained, but we are capable of making India secure and stable in a peaceful and a secure neighborhood
Right.
in which people can pursue their dreams.
That's very important. Ambassador Ashraf, also, US President Donald Trump has been talking about his role in bringing about the ceasefire. He has also repeated his offer to mediate on Kashmir, while India has made it clear that only return of POK and terror are on the table. And we also know that it's the Pakistani DGMO who wanted de-escalation. In fact, Pakistan was the one that wanted it, considering that India had already, hit out at Pakistani air bases. How can India navigate this diplomatically, specifically because India-US ties are also very important?
Well, I can't speak for what President Donald Trump has put out on social media. That's for him and his advisors to explain. But I think we've heard it very clearly from the government, the sequence of steps and I can tell you that I cannot imagine, and I've been through this in different capacities over the past 25 years, and more recently also in the government, that we would take the cue from the United States and say, okay, if you want us to stop, we will stop. Remember, we set out with every military action has a set of objectives. There's no open-ended military campaign in the world. And if you have a set of objectives, and if you achieve those objectives, then you want to minimize further costs and further risks, right? And if the adversary comes to you and says that we will not take any further, we are going to refrain from attacking you, we are going to refrain from pursuing missile and drone attacks, and that we will do some things to stop terrorism coming out of emanating from Pakistan, then we take that step, and we have simply suspended. We haven't said, okay, we believe you, and we are completely de-escalating. So we are in that state, and I don't think that there is any question of a third-party mediation. It has never been the case in the past. It will never be the case in the future. And logically speaking also, if you see around the world, unless two parties are willing to do something, no third party can come in and mediate and put pressure, and certainly not on a country like India. That is not going to happen. So any decision that we eventually take between our two countries will solely be the decision of our two countries. And whatever President Trump or US interlocutors might say publicly, or they may say it on social media, has no bearing on the sequence of events, our position, and our posture going forward. And as you have seen, what Prime Minister has clearly enunciated in his speech with regard to the prospects of India-Pakistan relations going forward, which is obviously the marker is nothing will happen unless terrorism stops. And that remains the case, including for the Indus Waters Treaty.
Right. Ambassador Ashraf, my last question to you, sir. A lot of experts have also been talking about how this is going to be seen globally, the ramifications of Operation Sindoor, because we are all convinced that, yes, of course, diplomatically, militarily, India has come out in a superior way. But people have also been talking about the dehyphenation of India and Pakistan that the government has been working on. What happens to that? And also, why is there no more international reprimand of Pakistan, specifically when it comes to its bluster around nuclear capabilities?
Well, I mean, I've said that before and wrote about it even before this started, that you cannot expect, or we cannot expect the international community to do our job for us. This is the responsibility of a major power like India to take the responsibility for securing her people and for safeguarding the country. So I don't think that we would be overly concerned about this prospect or this rehyphenation that actually Pakistan is very keen on, and that sometimes Western media and some of the Western powers would like to propagate as well. I think the hyphenation exists in the mind. The differences in the economies, the trajectory of growth, the differences in every attribute of power is uh, for everyone to see. Technologically, militarily, economically, politically, diplomatically, and internationally. And this is something where, anyway, there is a war, there will always be some level of international attention to it. But that doesn't mean that we see ourselves boxed into South Asia or rehyphenated with Pakistan, because, as I said, and I repeat it again, that there is a completely different level of, between the two countries on every attribute of power and completely different trajectories. And that is there for everyone to see. And we will continue on that path.
Yeah.
And we will continue to grow at the pace that we are. And we don't need to go every year to the IMF and to the World Bank and to other bilateral donors because that is a leverage for them. Why the international community does not reprimand them? I think partly they recognize that this is a aimless bluster,
Right.
which has no substance. And the second is that Pakistan probably, because has a lot of nuisance value, also have some strategic merit for them in terms of their own, perhaps, counter
Right.
terrorism operations.
Thank you, Ambassador Ashraf, for those excellent insights. It's important and possible to be calibrated, responsible, restrained, and also for the India growth story to grow. Thank you so much for your insights.